Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever found yourself totally stuck on a math problem, maybe one that involves area or some kind of unknown measurement? Well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to absolutely master quadratic equations, which is, a super important topic for your Class 10 exams. By the time we're done here, you'll have all the tools and the confidence you need to solve these things every single time. So, picture this. Your school wants to build a brand new Coco court. They've got the dimensions for the court itself, and they know the total area of the land they have to work with. But the tricky part is figuring out the exact width of the spectator area that has to go all the way around it. How in the world do you calculate that? If you try to tackle this with just a simple, basic equation, you're going to hit a brick wall. And that's because when you start multiplying unknown dimensions, like the width of that border by itself, you're going way beyond simple linear equations. To crack a puzzle like this, we need a much more powerful tool. Okay, let's dive right into it. The tool we need, the one that solves these kinds of puzzles, is the quadratic equation. It's literally designed for situations where a variable gets multiplied by itself, or, when it's squared. So this right here, this is the blueprint for every single quadratic equation we'll ever see. A is the number in front of the x squared, b is the number in front of the x, and c is just the constant on its own. Now, the most important rule here, the one you can't forget, is that a can never, ever be 0. Why? Well, think about it. If a was 0, that x squared term would just vanish. And poof, it's not a quadratic equation anymore. All right, so how do we actually solve these things? Well, our first method is called factorization. The whole idea here is to take that big, kind of complex quadratic expression and just break it down into two smaller, much simpler expressions that are multiplied together. It's like breaking a big puzzle into smaller pieces. Let's look really close at this, especially that key step, splitting the middle term. Our goal is to find two numbers that, 1, add up to the middle guy, -27, and 2, multiply to get the last number, 182. In this case, those magic numbers are -13 and -14. So, by rewriting -27x as -13x minus 14x, we can then group them up and factor it out. It's a really neat trick that just simplifies the whole problem and shows us our two solutions, 13 and 14. Now, factorization is a great first move, but let's be honest, it's not always easy to find the right factors. For those trickier equations, we've got a more powerful method called completing the square. This technique is all about strategically changing the shape of the equation into a format that's way, way easier to solve. The entire goal here, the whole point of these steps, is to manipulate the equation so that one side becomes a perfect square, something that looks like, x plus k squared. And as you can see, it's a very methodical process. You tweak the coefficients, you move the constant over, and then you add a very specific term to both sides to create that perfect square. It's kind of like following a recipe that turns a messy equation into a simple square root problem. And now for the heavy hitter, the one tool that works for every single quadratic equation, I don't care how complicated or weird the numbers are. This is the quadratic formula, and believe me, it is your ultimate key for solving these things. This formula you see on screen, this is the master key. It is absolutely essential that you memorize this for your exams. The process is so simple. You just identify your a, b, and c values from your equation, you plug them into this formula, and you carefully calculate the answer. It is guaranteed to give you the solution every single time. Having a tough time remembering that big formula? Don't worry. Here's a popular little story to help you out. So, a negative boy, negative b, was unsure, he was plus or minus, about going to a radical party. That's the square root. He was being a bit square, b squared, and missed out on meeting 4 awesome celebrities, 9 is 4ac. And the whole party was all over, that's the fraction line, at 2 a.m., divided by 2a. It's a silly story, I know, but it is an incredibly effective way to remember that formula. Okay, let's put it into practice. Here's a classic textbook problem about a motorboat. The equation we get is x squared plus 48x minus 324 equals 0. So our a is 1, b is 48, and c is -324. We just plug those values into our formula, simplify what's under the square root, and solve. We actually get 2 possible answers, but since speed can't be negative, the only logical answer is 6. See? The formula does all the heavy lifting for you. Okay, listen up, because this is a huge exam shortcut. Sometimes a question isn't going to ask you to solve the equation. It'll just ask about the type of solutions you're going to get. And for that, you don't even need the whole formula. You just need one tiny part of it. Let's zoom in on that one part of the formula, that little expression that's sitting inside the square root, b squared minus 4ac. This piece has a special name. It's called the discriminant, and its value all by itself tells you the nature of the solutions or roots without you having to do all the work of solving the entire equation. It's awesome. And it's really this simple. If the discriminant is a positive number, you're going to get two different real answers. If it's exactly 0, you'll get two real answers that are actually identical, so basically one solution. And if the discriminant is negative, well, you can't take the square root of a negative number in the real number system, which just means there are no real solutions. This concept is a total favorite for exam questions, so make sure you know it. All right, let's lock in all this key information for your exam. It's time for a super high-speed review of your entire quadratic equation arsenal. Okay, let's quickly review the 4 most important things you have to remember. First, the standard form. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Second, the quadratic formula itself, your ultimate solving tool. Third, the discriminant, d equals b squared minus 4ac, which predicts the answer. And finally, the 3 rules for the discriminant. If it's positive, you get 2 different roots. If it's 0, you get 2 equal roots. And if it's negative, no real roots. This one slide is basically the core of the entire chapter. All right, it's quiz time. Let's see what you've learned. First question. The key phrase here is equal roots. Now, what does that tell you about the discriminant? Question 2. This is a classic word problem. Your very first step is to translate these sentences into a quadratic equation. And here's a hint. Think about the Pythagorean theorem. And question 3. Notice that very specific instruction, without solving. That is your big clue to use the discriminant. Just calculate b squared minus 4ac and you're done. Question 4 for you. How do you represent 2 consecutive integers using algebra? Well, you can call them x and x plus 1. Now go ahead and build your equation from there. And our final quiz question. First, set up your equations for perimeter and area. Then, when you try to solve for the length and the breadth, what does the discriminant tell you about the solution? Is it even possible? You know, the biggest takeaway from all of this is that quadratic equations are way more than just abstract algebra. Anytime a problem involves calculating an area or tracking the path of a ball you've thrown or finding some kind of optimal value, there's probably a quadratic equation hiding at its core. It's a really practical tool for solving real-world puzzles. And here's a final thought I want to leave you with. We've totally mastered puzzles in 2D, right? Like area. But what happens when you add a third dimension, height, and you start calculating things like volume? How do our equations have to adapt to solve problems in 3D space? That is the next exciting step on your math journey. Thanks for watching.